As mountain bikers, I'm sure most of us are aware that we open ourselves up to the possibility of injury. I know I am, from my years of racing downhill, then enduro, and more recently. And on the more serious end of the scale are head injuries, and they need to be treated as such. Now, previously we have done a video about what concussion is, but in this video, with the help of POC, Bex Baraona, and the Enduro World Series, we're going to give you a guide as to what you should be doing after you've hit your head. Hey Bex, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. Enjoying lockdown.
Yeah, loving riding your bike.
I am, yeah, getting plenty of riding time in, and the sunshine, of course, which is nice.
You seem to have a great year in 2019 on the EWS circuit.
Yeah, there was some pretty good highs and then a couple of little lows.
What's the biggest difference between being a privateer and being on a pro team with help?
Oh, the difference is massive, because just lets you sort of forget about all the little niggly things, like when you're organising a season, like even just, people don't think that like organising like booking flights and all the rest like contributes to your performance, but like when you don't have that stress hanging over you, it's super useful, and like you just switch off, focus on the riding. And I don't know, for me, I felt like I've turned a corner in terms of like understanding what it takes to be professional, in terms of like the things that really are important, like even just down to small things like making sure your biking kit is spick and span, because that's how professionals act and stuff like that. I probably wouldn't have thought about as much when I was privateer. It was more just rag the bike and go as fast as you can.
It seemed to work because you got third place at Rotorua. How did that feel, getting onto the podium the first time?
Yeah, no, that was super surreal. It was the opening round of the season, and like you kind of don't really know where you're going to be hitting at, like in the field, like you just don't know where you're going to end up on the first race. Finished off the season before pretty well and pretty strong, and then I just was having so much fun out there, and like that, clearly that's what works for me. And yeah, it was super surreal because I've worked so long and hard that was my goal of the season, and when I got it in the first race, it was kind of like, what now?
Amazing. Definitely there are some tough times as being a pro, and part and parcel of that is dealing with crashes. Now, you had a pretty big one in Kanazai. How did that affect your season?
Yeah, so the season was all going really well and like in the right direction, and then just a little silly crash, which was probably me learning like where my limits are. Like I was pretty tired just towards the end of practice, and just didn't take into account this like nothing small feature at the end of a trail, which was like a wooden boardwalk jump, and just miscalculated and landed pretty hard on tarmac and broke some ribs, which was a big bummer for me. I've never actually had a broken bone up until then, so I've done pretty well so far. But yeah, in terms of like mentally and dealing with it, it's really difficult to like go from such a high to then such a low, especially mid-season. And you've obviously got the pressures of being professional, and like you want to provide for your sponsors and your team, but you can't really do anything right there and then. I couldn't do anything.
And what about, you said you had a off-season crash in 2018 that affected you?
Yeah, so crashing is obviously part of the game, and you have a good build-up of loads of little ones. And I basically we were on team camp, took a little, I was actually trying to get my teammates to teach me to manual and I just basically got it all wrong and kind of slid out, went sideways, and really small hit, to be honest, when you look at it. Like some of the gnarly stuff that you see people doing, like sending massive gaps and then hitting trees and stuff, it was nothing like that. It was relatively calm and controlled, but it just took a side hit. And like I've learned now, my brain really doesn't take side hits, because I had that, and then I noticed like I was a bit different, and like I don't know how to put it, like probably just didn't feel like me for quite a long time, and it was hard to put it down to that crash, because it didn't really hurt. The crash didn't hurt as such, and then took a few tiny little hits, like I was on the airbag one day and had full face helmet on and everything, but just took a tiny little, like the airbag kind of just whipped my helmet like a bit of backlight as the air fills up as you land on it. And then that I noticed again kind of rattled my head a little bit, and the build up of these little hits really affected me. Like I was struggling to drive, like it was stuff that then I'd started to read about that was actually really not good. And that's when I started to like read into it more, and there was obviously other stories about other riders suffering from head hits, and I sort of delved into all the information out there, and I take it a lot more seriously now.
So injuries can happen at any time, and we're looking really at head injuries in this video. At the EWS, everyone races in full face helmets, but how much do you practice in them or ride in them normally?
Yeah, that's been a big thing, like since the EWS is completely full face, and like obviously it's horrible riding in a full face helmet when you're traipsing up like 1,000-meter climbs and stuff, but it's something I have started training in now, but definitely not like as much. Like I'll still ride my bike just as fast. Like in some scenarios when I'm training, like because I won't be, like I actually go out to train to get used to being in a full face helmet again, because it's not as enjoyable to be in a full face helmet when you're riding up them hills. So it's something I've started training doing, but I just have to have confidence in my kit, because the fact that I'm out there with like a smaller helmet on, but I'm riding the same kind of pace, I need to focus on what I'm doing. I can't be thinking about like the outcomes of potentially hitting my head. So having confidence in my kit is huge, and just having the right equipment as well. So I'm racing in a POC Tectal. Well, I'm training in a POC Tectal half helmet, and then I'm racing in a POC Corin spin helmet, the carbon one.
You know, if you break your arm, it's obvious you've broken your arm. How do you call it with a head injury?
Yeah, no, it's like when I broke my ribs last year, it was super easy to not race the next day because I couldn't physically like turn over in bed, let alone race a bike. But with a head injury, like that's the point when it's really difficult for people to make that call themselves, because there's nobody else that can make the call. And since I've had a head injury, like I feel in a much better position to be able to say, no, I'm not okay to put myself like under any like risk of taking any other head injury. So yeah, it's really difficult, and sometimes you just feel like you're going to be missing out on fun, or you just think, oh, I could just go and do that other race, like if I just get through this weekend and then I'm done. Because obviously we have back-to-back weekends, and sponsor pressures and pressures from yourself. You want to do good, you've got 8 races in the season to just do, and they're over pretty quick actually. So but like I can't stress enough how important your brain is, because it took me months to come out, like to get over like just things like feeling tired, concentrating and stuff. And these little build-up things which you just think, oh, maybe I've just had a bad night's sleep, they really aren't. They're like actually to do with your brain. So yeah, just got to make that call and just be the better person, and just know that you'll be able to ride, like I'm sure later down the line, but right there you need to stay safe from not having any more head hits. Not just riding as well, like even there was other things like just potentially, I don't know, if you're going for a run or something like that, like if there's anything that's going to aggravate it, and even if it's fun or not fun, it's like something you need to do.
The Enduro World Series have taken a great step towards educating the riders and have published a very useful and very clear pocket guide to concussions. Concussion injury red flags include loss of consciousness or deteriorating conscious state, lying motionless on the ground, confusion or irritability, severe or increasing headache, severe neck pain or tenderness, repeated vomiting, double vision, seizure or convulsions, weakness, tingling or burning sensations in the arms or legs. And the symptoms of a concussion include a headache, dizziness, a feeling of pressure in the head, confusion, nausea, light or sound sensitivity, balance problems, attention problems or fatigue. A big red flag with this type of injury is a big impact to the head could also cause you neck injuries. Some of those you probably know about, but some I didn't, like the light sensitivity or the tingling in the arms and legs. So what do you do after you've had a concussion? Now the first thing to do is to stop riding. Most people recover gradually from concussions in the first few days, but some people, up to 15%, can actually take a month to recover. You must seek medical attention. Don't go home by yourself. Don't drive until you're cleared by a medical professional. Don't be alone for the first 24 hours and take complete rest. Avoid excessive screen time and prescription or recreational drugs and alcohol. Avoid exercise and don't fly. When the acute symptoms have resolved, follow a gradual return to riding, and there's more about that in the EWS handbook as well. It's important that you address concussions because you have an increased vulnerability for a few days, meaning that if you hit your head again before you've had time to recover, then there can be worse outcomes and a higher risk of ongoing health consequences. Loads of great information there from the EWS in that handbook, so credit to them for helping educate riders. Now over to Rick from the EWS to talk about a study they did recently.
Last year we released the results from the biggest ever injury and concussion study ever undertaken in mountain biking, and that was 2,000 riders surveyed across 10 Enduro World Series events between 2017 and 2018, and the results were actually pretty surprising. We found that only 8.9% of those surveyed actually suffered an injury. And I mean, that's really, really low, especially when you put it in context of things like the Rio Olympics, when I think during the cross-country disciplines, that was around 23.8% actually suffered an injury. And it's certainly a lot safer than popular sports such as rugby. Now, the biggest injury we did see were collarbones and shoulder, that sort of area. And on average, we worked out they take 25 days to recover from. And it's probably why you'll see a lot of pro riders do a lot of extra training around that area of their body, if not to stave off the injury, then certainly to help recover from it. One of the most interesting facts was actually the relatively low rate of concussions that we saw. In fact, it works out that to suffer one concussion, you'd have to race on average 263 Enduro World Series events. So that's it's not to say that it doesn't happen in the sport, but that's certainly encouraging.
Well, my experience of head injuries mainly comes from seeing other people knock themselves out, to be honest. As a downhill racer, you know, riding, practicing with friends, hitting big jumps, doing this, you know, maybe 4 or 5 days a week, and then of course racing World Cups, you do see people knock themselves out. I've seen plenty of friends knock themselves out, you know, on the floor, convulsing, snoring. Lots of pretty serious injuries where people will come round and you see the confusion and the way they just can't remember things in the aftermath. And I've definitely seen people that haven't dealt with them probably with the seriousness that they deserve. People that maybe, you know, spend the day at home recovering, but then next day they're back out on the bike. Because probably until a couple of years ago, people didn't really know exactly what to do about head injuries. And there's been much more high profile cases, sports like BMX or even the NFL, where players have suffered long-term consequences because of head injuries. So I'm sure now people will deal with them with much more respect than they used to. And personally, you know, from all those years of racing, I sort of managed to not hit my head for quite a long time, until more recently where I had a really serious road bike accident. And I was, you know, unconscious for a very long time. I don't remember anything for probably about 2 hours. I then remember waking up in hospital with all sorts of other injuries. And I definitely suffered for quite a while. I mean, there was a lot of injuries going on and I was on painkillers for those, but you know, there was a pretty serious recovery from that head injury as well. So, you know, from my experience, I've really had to deal with proper respect for that head injury and really think about giving my body time to recover, not just the broken bones, but also my head as well. So what can you do to try and avoid concussions? Well, truthfully, you're never going to be able to completely avoid the risk of some types of head impact. It's just trying to make sure that you have the right equipment for those situations. Many helmets these days have design features for rotational impacts to try and take away some of that force that can cause concussions. So it's making sure you've got the right equipment, but then being prepared so you know what to do if you do have a concussion, and making sure you do treat that with the seriousness that it does deserve. Make sure you do check out the other video we did with the help of POC, where we went to talk to them and some of their experts on head injuries and concussions, and also make sure you get yourself fitted out with a proper helmet. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video and you find it useful.